politics is held in quite low regard in this country at the moment. Some of that has been justified. Much of that, I know from working with colleagues right across this chamber, is entirely unjustified. And I think it would be remiss of us if we didn't end the evening by putting on record our thanks to members who we know are standing down at the forthcoming elections for their service to Thurrock during their time in office. Contrary to what is sometimes said to me on the doors, people don't do this job for the money, because there's very little in it. They don't do it for the status, because you often feel like you pick up far more criticism than you do praise and admiration in doing the role that councillors do. Almost everybody you talk to them, when you get them in a non-political moment, usually on their own after some event, when they start telling you their story, it's out of a desire to serve their community, out of a desire to do some kind of good, and seeing the realm of politics as a place where that is possible, that they get into politics in the first place. I have to just mention a couple of names. First of all, Councillor Mike Revell, often regarded and recognised as the current senior member of this chamber. I've incredibly valued his wisdom and experience in my time as Conservative leader for the simple reason that usually he's seen it before, whether that's with the council or with something else. He's had numerous achievements during his time serving as a councillor in Thurrock. One he rarely lets us forget around is the change to the council's waste service and the placement of the waste contracts. But he's had a passion for education, a passion for looked after children, a consistent desire that we as corporate parents should perform in the same way as natural parents do for their children. And I think as many an officer has come to dread the question from Councillor Revell, could I just have a quick look at your accounts, please? He's never been afraid to be political, but I think he has gained a certain respect because in truth he's earned it. I'd also like to acknowledge Councillor Wendy Hurd, who's standing down this year. Councillor Revell has on several opportunities taken the chance to remind us of his achievements. When I first became a councillor, one of the things that frequently came up was the work that Councillor Hurd and Councillor Arnold were doing and had done ceaselessly over a number of years around the work of the council in health and adult social care. A lot of that work was behind the scenes. It was done in committees, it was done very consensually, it was done in a way that was determined to drive improvement in those vitally important services to so many residents. And I think that kind of more behind the scenes work over many years exemplifies what many councillors do away from the spotlight of the press and the chamber, and ought to be commended. But I do put on record my thanks to all members for the service that they put in, regardless of whether they're standing down this year, and regardless of the outcome of the elections this year. But nonetheless, for those who've already announced a retirement from public service, I would particularly commend members this motion to recognise their service. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to second this motion, and just to say a few words on a couple of people who are standing down. First of all, it's good to see former Councillor Diane Revell here this evening. I have often said that I thought that Diane deserved a medal for putting up with Mike for as long as I've seen nothing this evening that's changed my mind whatsoever. And in many ways, watching Mike this evening was a little bit like going to a Rolling Stones concert, because we had all the old favourites rolled out. You know, we had the where are the figures in the portfolio holders reports. We had the legendary I've lived through every Labour government that's ever been. I've always enjoyed that one, Mr. Mayor, and I hope that Councillor Revell is about for long enough to live through many more Labour governments. I would pay tribute to the work that Mike did in both the environment and in education, and I would also say that Mike has always been a doughty opponent in the council chamber. He's always been tenacious, he's always been argumentative, he's often been irritating, but everything he did was usually done with a smile, and you always felt that he had the best interests of the community and the best interests of Thurrock at heart. As we've often said before, we frequently disagree in the council chamber because that's the bit that, let's face it, we very often enjoy. We agree on more than we disagree about. Sometimes we disagree on the means of getting there, but we normally agree with the target, and that's always been the case with Mike. And I also want to say a few words about Martin Healy. You know, I've known Martin for over 20 years. This was Martin's second spell on the council. His first spell was as a Labour councillor on Chappard 100, in the days when Chappard 100 were sensible enough to elect Labour councillors. I'm sure they'll be sensible enough to do it again this year. Martin won that year by one vote. That's all it was one vote. Those of us who stand for election frequently, as we get to that nervous time, sort of the week before the election, we always say one's enough. And for Martin, one was enough. Martin was then defeated in 2004 and took a good deal of time off from serious engagement in politics or serious engagement in the council before returning in my ward of Grays Riverside in 2010. You know, I have to say that I have been really privileged to serve alongside Martin Healy. Martin is one of those guys who very, very quietly gets on with doing the day-to-day drudgery of dealing with the community, dealing with community forums, turning up on people's houses at 8 o'clock at night when they phone because there's an issue. He's also been a fantastic advocate for small business in this community. The work he does with the Small Business Initiative is absolutely legendary. And I really, really do feel that this chamber will be all the worse for not having Martin. It will be poorer in many ways as well for not having Mike. And I have to say that there are some here tonight that don't know that they won't be back. I do wonder whether Councillor Anderson should have declared an interest at the start. But I do want to take the opportunity of thanking those who are standing down because they want to, and thanking those who are being stood down by the electorate.
I have my own personal tribute to my good friend Mike Revel, whom I've known since about 1972. And yes, Mike is one of our elder councillors, and I can say that because I know he was born in 1934. Mike first joined the Conservative Party in 1953. That was actually the year I was born. And he joined just because of the Young Conservatives hockey team, I believe. I don't know if it was the, well, I don't know, I think it was the gym slips and the navy blue knickers, I'm not quite sure. He probably has. He's virtually held all the positions at both branch and association levels within the Conservative Association, and he was the PA to the Right Honourable Tony Newton MP, and he actually stood as a parliamentary candidate for Blythe Valley in 1992. He is, as you all know, a formidable campaigner. One of the many stories I can relate to was when out campaigning in the ward with his dear wife Diane. She tripped and actually fell over, and the girls called out to Mike what had happened, only to be told if she's not broken anything, she'll catch up, onwards and upwards. He is focused in everything he does and determined, but most of all he is a good friend. And even though we argue a lot, I am sure he will be giving all his opinions for many years to come, and I wish sincerely Mike a happy retirement with Diane, though I think over in Kent, beware, he's already on the prowl.
Myself and Councillor Healy have many political differences, and they're important differences. It's why his constituents elected him as Labour, it's why my constituents elected me as Conservative. But when I found out about Councillor Healy's slightly ill health, it was a very sobering moment, because it does remind us that we are all essentially in the chamber for the same reason, and perhaps at times we need to be a bit more generous towards each other. I've always found Councillor Healy to be a thoroughly decent person to work with, and I generally do wish him the very best. In terms of Councillor Revel, we've heard virtually every joke we can have about Councillor Revel. When he was telling me about his service during the war, I inquired whether that was the war that had the Kaiser in it. He got cross. No one can doubt Mike's dedication, whether it's his dedication to the taxpayer he's championed, or to his generosity, certainly to younger members of the chamber, both myself and Councillor Key, Councillor Nicklin when he was with us, Councillor Hebb. We've all been the beneficiary of Mike's advice, never someone who would try to temper my enthusiasm, but someone who would just calmly tell me, think things through for a change, and just slow down ever so slightly. I was trying to find a story about Councillor Merrill, but I couldn't find any that really were fit for public consumption. I know Councillor Little referenced the time that he was a parliamentary candidate in Blythe Valley. I can't really understand why Welsh mining town didn't warm to Mike Revel.
Just because it was in Northumberland.
Councillor... God, calm down, Garish. Councillor Revel genuinely will be missed, certainly on our side. The Chamber will be a poorer place without him, because we can't replace him. But the Conservative group will certainly be a better place, because what Mike has done will endure. He's been nothing other than a fine mentor and an excellent friend to me, and Diane, we're very happy to give him back to you, and he's now your problem.
And of course she was the Mayor of Thurrock. And yes, I hope to be alive if there is another Labour government in this country, but I hope to be living in another country. Can I say that we all come here to... I've got to be nice to you now, of course. And we all... that's easy, because I know that we all come here to do our best for our residents. And we want to make a difference, and I think, well, have I made a difference? Yes. Well, I'll always be associated with rubbish. That is for sure. You have mentioned the leader of the Conservatives. Phil has mentioned the waste contract. There are three things. I think that would be the third. The second one was, and this wasn't mentioned, I was very pleased that we did pass the motion. We did it with James Holden, and I was very happy with that, to get the portfolio holders to include financial reports in their reports, because it is so vital. Because we need to know not only what is spent, but we need the opportunity as councillors to ask how it was spent. And if we're not given that opportunity, we cannot represent our residents. And the third thing, that I think in first place was the corporate parenting group. I was very proud, again with James Holden, to get that up and established. We all as councillors have a legal requirement to be, for our looked after children, to be, in the terms of the Act, good parents. But it isn't sufficient just to have a corporate parenting group. It's got to work. It's got to work with all the councillors. And I'm very pleased to see that we now have a square has now been formed between the councillors, the officers, the foster carers, and also the children. And it's working. But there is one important thing it has to be. The committee has to be run by the councillors and by nobody else. Thank you very much. I'd be pleased to be with you.